Hello and welcome to episode 16 of the VCD RoundTable. We know it's been a while since we got together last, but a lot has changed in the VMware ecosystem, and a lot of us were on tour for the last couple of weeks. Now we are back all in our home offices or somewhere else, and we wanted to get started again. We give you a bit of a heads up at the end of the show about what we are planning for the next few sessions. But before we go into this session and into any of the details around the topics for today, which are going to be VCF and the service provider and service provider programs and the challenges with that, let's do a quick round of introductions. As always, someone throws the ball over to someone else. So I'm going to start with Sascha, who is the only one, I think, who is not sitting at home at the moment.
Yeah. Welcome. My name is Sascha Schwunk, CRO and Cloud Architect at Comdivision. Yeah, happy to be a part of this episode and talking with you about VCF and the new partner program and what's new for the service providers. Fabian.
Hey, thanks, Sascha. Fabian, my name, president and partner at Comdivision, doing a lot of collaboration between Comdivision and VMware, and therefore a lot of interesting times are ahead of us. But I'm sure we figure out what's the best. So, Matthias, tell me what you are doing at the moment.
Yeah, Matthias, partner and cloud architect at Comdivision. What I'm doing, I think I'm the only one who works actually. That I'm just being member of someone or something. That's what I'm doing. Toby.
Yeah, hello. Tobias Paschek, partner at Comdivision in the whole networking part.
Good. So getting started with the news, which VMware basically, I read it somewhere. Some media wrote it's like a Christmas present for the partner. I'm not sure if most of the partners really consider it a Christmas party.
I think they haven't seen it yet.
Some of it haven't even seen it yet. So from a European time zone perspective, somewhere around lunchtime or late afternoon, depending on which partner category you fell into, you got a wonderful email from VMware saying that on the first hand, your partner contract is going to be terminated by the end of January, beginning of February. And the other more important mail, which were for the service providers, which came a few hours later, is the termination of the service provider programs as well, or the adjusted timeline, because in the end, the service provider contract is also just a partner contract, and those contracts end by the end of April, beginning of May. But we will come into a bit more details on some of these. And with that in parallel, we have all the changes which were already announced on the 11th of December, where Broadcom unveiled the new licensing and packaging of the products, which as at least it currently looks like is going to be the future for the service providers as well. So let me quickly start with the contractual pieces, and then I'm going to head over so that someone can talk about the new packaging and licensing and a few other things. So what does it mean if VMware canceled all the service provider contracts by end of April / beginning of May? The most important part, which I advise all service providers, somewhere in that email is a link to an FAQ document, which I strongly suggest you download as well, because that contains a lot more information about what this email actually means for you in general. Because what we know from that email is that the new program, both for service providers as well as cloud, as well as normal VMware partners, is going to be an invite-only program. So this means you now have to sit back. You cannot just go to a webpage and register yourself. You have to sit back, relax, and wait and hope that you get an invite into any of these programs, and then you can potentially continue under new circumstances. Because we all know the majority of that program is most likely going to change. There is also something in the FAQs which says, If you do not get an invite, there might be other ways, and they call it a white label service, on how you can progress as a partner. As you might understand, this is a public podcast, so we can't actually give you more details on what we personally think, on where potentially you might be located. A lot of our customers, so service providers we work with on a regular basis, already reached out to us, and we had talks to them about what we currently experience or expect for them to happen. If you feel that you want to have a more closer discussion, or if you want to actually get more details about that, please feel free to reach out to any one of us, and then we can set up a dedicated session with you and quickly go over what potential consequences might be in the program change for you. As far as we know and as far as we expect, everything else has to come from VMware, but we also understand that in between the holidays, you might not want to wait until mid-January or whenever you get new information. There's also another note in there which says on the 4th of January, you will get more details. There is a webcast announced from VMware where they are going to give more details. Honestly, I'm not expecting too much in that webcast on the service provider side. I have the feeling that is going to be primarily on the normal partner program side. But nevertheless, that's going to be shown on the 4th of January. I'm expecting we will see more from the service providers later on. But I can rest you assured from all what we see currently, there is work going on. Yesterday, we had the second Christmas day here in Germany, and I was also on the call with some of the EMEA cloud provider teams. So there is a lot going on in the background at the moment, but not all of that should be in public. So that's all about the partner changes. Maybe who wants to summarize a bit of what the VCF enterprise could mean for a service provider based on the announcements from the 11th of December?
And just before we get to the point, Yves, one thing that I figured out on social media is that many people are confused about this message coming up that partner contracts are terminated. It's not related to customer contracts or whatever, because a lot of people were kind of concerned that now their VMware license is not valid anymore. The subscription needs to get renegotiated. It's really just not for the customer. It's between VMware and the partners, those guys who typically help you getting your environment up, getting your subscriptions and license ready, just to make sure. I guess the audience of this podcast typically knows that, but yeah, I saw so many, wrong statements on social media to clarify that up front.
Yes, as long as your partner is not providing you with managed services, then you're fully affected by this as well. So it is affecting some more partner scenarios, and what we know is not all customers know that they are running under a managed service contract, and those would be terminated as well.
Yeah, but wouldn't I, as a customer, I don't care. I have the contract with the service provider. However, they are creating the service. I typically don't care. So I mean, depending on
what your contract says.
Yeah, exactly. But normally I would say it's still the problem of the managed service provider to get this service up and running, no matter what.
Yeah, there is at least in Europe, there is also a term in contracts which is talking about things like good belief, and that is actually a legal term. And good belief basically means that when you actually signed the contract with your customer, that you were in the good belief that no one on the other side would terminate, then you could basically use that to terminate your end customer contracts as well. So that is already what I heard from two legal people, is under these specific scenarios, as an MSP or CSP, you most likely have an opportunity to basically kill the contract with your customer. The challenge with that is you more or less need to do that immediately. I think you only have 7 business days or something like that after you receive the notice, which is basically going to be next Monday or Tuesday. But then you don't know how VMware is going to continue. So there are a few challenges. I would not actually start going into legal advice too much here, but it's not necessarily that easy that only because you're an end customer, you should be not affected if you have a perpetual license. Everything which is not a perpetual license, I would be very careful and validate with your reseller if you might be affected, because the ways of subscription licenses on how some of them were applied we know for ourselves that there are several partners out there who basically rented MSP and CSP licenses out to customers, and they are all affected now. Good. So much about contracts and contractual stuff, which is never fun. So who wants to actually quickly talk about VCF Enterprise and
maybe the guy who's only working and not doing the legal and organizational stuff?
Yeah, maybe that guy.
Yeah, but I'm not doing VCF either, so no, just
So you're not working in the future anymore.
yeah. I joined management or sales or marketing.
Okay, so yeah, let's talk about VCF. So what we saw in December is that we will get VCF for the service providers, VCF Enterprise. That means we have vSphere licenses, we have vSAN licenses. All is licensed by core, not longer per VRAM. That means we have 1 terabyte of vSAN storage per core. We have NSX networking, we have ARIA Suite Enterprise, we have the STDZ managers, and we have support. And then we have some add-ons that we can buy on top per core based. That's, for example, firewall. That's firewall with advanced threat protection. That's load balancing and so on. So it will become interesting, and some very important points here is from our perspective that it is core based. That means, and there will be a minimum of cores that you have to pay per server. And with this combination, you have to calculate for the future. If you have old legacy hardware, it doesn't look good from the pricing perspective for you in the future. If you have many CPUs and many memory running, so what the calculations what we saw looks like that it's a fair pricing in the future. So you don't have to expect that massive raise of prices you have to pay for VCF instead of the VRAM. So for most of the service provider, it looks really good. A topic where we have to take a deeper look is, for example, DR scenarios, where you have tons of servers running without active workload, though that makes no sense in the future, and we need to find a solution, redesign your infrastructure for that. But yeah, that's the VCF.
Yeah, it is a case, Sasha, but this is already one of the big advantages of going into the VCF story, because the hosts which are not prepared for VCF at the moment are not counting. So I can already prepare my hosts up front, and as soon if I need to ramp up new or create new hosts into my cluster, just provision it.
That's perfect. So you are able to provision it, unprovision it later on. That's a little bit challenging maybe in the future with vSAN, if you are going only with vSAN. But yeah, that's possible.
Yeah, but that means those nice 64-core AMD processors are not the one we need now in all our CPUs. Shall I buy some Intel stocks, therefore?
Maybe, yeah.
I wouldn't be too sure where the revenues actually increases faster, whether it's Intel or Broadcom. But Fabian,
make a decision
Fabian,
either
we
by
actually,
Intel or AMD and share what you are doing.
now let's call it that way. Is we originally were all like PET, so therefore Fabian, no Intel stock for you. We also want to be successful on the Broadcom side, so no Broadcom stock for you either. Stick with something like Wirecard, that's fine. Good. No, but I think is, as Sascha just said, it's like we did quite a few calculations with service providers in the last 5, 6, 7 days since the announcement. And the majority of them were basically, even when we were just applying list prices, not even calculating in the discounts we are expecting for service providers, they were already cheaper when they were applying the list prices. There are some which are going to be heavily affected, and those are the ones who are running massive in-memory databases. I'm looking at the Sapana guys. That's going to be an interesting game moving forward, because so far they had the 24 gigabytes cap. They only paid to the 24 gigabytes, and then they were fine. And that's going to be quite a bit of an impact for those people, because for them in the future, there will be a heavy price tag. In reality, it's fair.
Same thing with firewalling, because now with the old points and the basic package of NSX within the VCD space, you had the thing that the gateway firewall was part of the basic Flex bundle. With the new VCF going forward, if you do your calculations for the new infrastructure, just be aware that firewall is now an add-on product and not part of the base license anymore.
Yeah, but that add-on is not that expensive, as long as you don't add the IDS, IPS pieces.
You need to take it into account for a proper calculation.
Yes. But still, even if I take it into account, in most cases, it still looks very attractive. It looks as attractive as in some cases it would be more something where service providers more or less ask us, like, how quickly can I change into the new model?
And also right sizing gets more important again. I mean, to be fair, over the last years with the memory approach, we always said, hey, management cluster, take four nodes, put vSAN on top of it. And yeah, since it's calculated by memory, it's simply easy. So now I think we need to be, let's say, more efficient in also sizing what is a realistic value of cores, and therefore give a correct guidance, at least for the cloud management cluster. So yeah, I think we need to get back into a more, let's say, physical usage related state, to not simply say, yeah, put in the best amount of hardware you get and get to say that, I don't know, with 60 cores on a management cluster, you will be quite fine, or 48 in total.
Yeah, not starting with all the hardware. So in the last projects we saw it, the customer or the service provider say, hey, I buy 20 servers, 30 servers, whatever, and start with all servers in the cluster, all are running. So that will change in the future. Depending on
I hope the Dell and HPE sales guy are in the same way, because they're pretty good at selling the hardware boxes and they put in all the CPUs that are on stock. I mean, to be fair, over the last years, very often people simply ordered what was kind of in an early deliverable state. So therefore, let's hope to get back more choice again with processors.
Yeah. Which also points to the case that, and this is more or less a requirement at the whole VCF story at the moment, you should go with an homogeneous cluster. So you should have the same pieces of hardware in your workload, or not in your workload domain, to be fair, just in a single cluster in a workload domain, because you can have multiple clusters in a single workload domain as well. So yes, from a licensing perspective, it is quite interesting, but you need to calculate already at the beginning with some spare, because you cannot say, okay, it looks like that I would require at the moment this amount of CPU, this amount of memory, and will not think about any scaling, because then you immediately need to create maybe a second cluster in a single workload domain with new hardware as well. So also here there is a little bit of a pitfall.
Yeah, but I mean, it's overall when it comes to the different design choices, and as we said, it's like we are going to make an additional series or additional sessions around VCF design, pros and cons of different scenarios, and how we could actually align VCF from that perspective. I think is we need to design our data centers as service providers a bit different in the future with this. But a huge advantage which we got from several providers, because a lot of European service providers were after the cloud verified badge and also behind scenarios to long-term become sovereign cloud providers. And one of the requirements for that was the utilization of vSAN, with vSAN now being more or less included because you get 1 terabyte per core. So this gives you quite a lot of space on most of the physical boxes. And in many cases, it's not going to be even necessary to think about buying additional terabytes of storage then. vSAN all of a sudden becomes very attractive, as again, like with every other feature, it's basically the highest edition. So you have all the features. You can build stretched, you can build large scale objects, and all of that is basically now possible. So that again, there is a lot of new features as a service provider. So it's not only about the change that you get to use VCF. Moving forward, one of the important steps for service providers is to figure out how we can actually utilize all these features to also generate new demand and market from the customers. And another important statement, which Hock made several times in the last couple of weeks as well, is that Broadcom is committed to the service providers to ensure that in the future, customers who want to move off the on-prem environment move towards the cloud providers. And I think that is also a very good news for the service providers. And if we envision that moving forward, everybody more or less has the same platform, the same tools, the same technologies, this is going to make all of that transition a lot easier than what it currently looks like.
Absolutely, which also brings me to the most important part in the whole VCF game, to say, hey, it is a standardized deployment. It is something which is still highly customizable. It is not something you need to say, hey, but I can only do this or that. You have still the chances to do a highly customizable deployment, but at the end, you have a standardized deployment from your vendor, which makes troubleshooting, supporting much easier than everything else we have in the past.
And I mean, if we look at our past engagements, the bigger ones, we just have this one customer where we designed the whole new environment. Let's say, the outcome of our design is, let's say, close to what you get with VCF. The changes required is quite minor. So also we had in the past some config sheet where you put in all the VLANs, all the networks that you need, all the features you want to have. So if you ever had an engagement with us, it is quite similar. For sure, now we need to be on certain design decisions. We are probably more restricted. I mean, we used LACP in the past. That is not possible in the current state of VCF, if I remember it correctly. To be honest, I'm happy about that. I hate LACP. But anyway, so we simply the change is not that big. And I mean, the big challenge when designing a cloud platform is also to collect all the constraints and the risks of dedicated organization, because every organization service provider is different with their, let's say, own constraints, because their data center is a complete different layout. Their operations on site works completely in a different way as with the next service provider. So we need to get all this information straight right in the beginning. And I'm quite happy, because even though we had the config sheet in the past, there were some delays sometimes because customer needed to provide certain information in time. And then, they were quite slow. Sometimes they didn't have all the information. They said, we get it on the road. And now with VCF, you're nearly forced to have everything in place on day 0. So when you start deploying, everything must be in place, and that's something that is pretty good. I mean, that reminds me of the old concept of the cloud provider pod, which was also awesome, because there was this list of dependencies that you needed to fulfill, and you could not simply work around by waiting on, I don't know, the firewall rules, I guess they're in place, I don't know, let's start and see where we're going, because that's where you lose time in deployments, and that's where things will definitely get streamlined by making sure on day 0 everything is in place.
Which brings since you mentioned cloud provider pod, Fabian, which brings me already to the next thing. extensibility of VCF. So you have already the vCloud provider lifecycle manager is there since ages, but to be honest, since version 1.4 and now we are talking about 1.6, we have now really a nice looking web interface which is really usable nowadays. Brings me to the point, okay, standardized deployment, config sheets already upfront must be there, because this is also a big part of the cloud provider lifecycle manager, that you need to have all of the necessary information upfront, because otherwise I cannot start my deployment. So it is now the same story on the hardware side or on the data center layer, where I say, okay, I ramp up my whole environment with VCF, and then bring in my cloud layer with the cloud provider lifecycle manager.
Yeah, and still we are still in the phase of designing cloud infrastructure, which is, I mean, so as lame as it sounds, it is kind of commodity, because no service provider differentiates himself by having, you know, simply the cloud director deployed. And it's really about putting services on top of it, getting the integration to the customers, make it easy to integrate with the customers, making collaboration, I don't know, with Megaport, making sure people connect easy to your environment, making sure your sales team is able to showcase certain things. So when you design and deploy a cloud environment, it's much more than having just the cloud set up and run away. There's so much stuff around this where, yeah, I mean, in the past, we showed that we can guide people on how to develop the certain skill sets within their own organization and make sure they consume and produce something on top of the cloud as good as possible. And that won't change with VCF. I mean, VCF is still now it's a standardized stack commodity. We don't care about the infrastructure, and we also come in to Matthias, you know, oh no, it's this side now. But we need, I mean, we as Comdivs, we make sure that the cloud is running, but we also try to make sure those providers can make the best out of it on top of it, and that won't change with VCF, and you still need the know-how. It's not just simply something where you click the box. I mean, Yves, I guess on day 1st of May 2024, service provider can simply click a button, move to VCF, okay? Is it working like that? I guess so. Since I'm in the management position, I guess
I can easily build you a PowerPoint which shows that to you. And then I put a little asterisk mask in future release with API, fully featured API integration. You will be able to do that.
Awesome. I think in the past I was always overconfident in saying, yeah, I can script it quite easy. And now with ChatGPT, I was becoming even more confident. I think that stole me this year hundreds of hours of troubleshooting some weird script migration stuff.
Because you don't know what the script does, because ChatGPT is written.
Yeah, not really.
But if Fabian scripting something, you can be sure it deletes a mandatory item.
Could be in test environments, I guess.
Yeah, you would never actually make a mass deployment in a loop or something like that, and actually combine that with a delete.
Not mass deployment. We're talking about mass deletion.
Yeah, but no one would actually be stupid enough to put a delete command inside of
it. And it was just a workaround.
No one would, yes.
It was a workaround.
There was some limitations in the API working with VApp templates, so I had a nice little workaround that might have, in rare conditions, destroyed certain things, but I recognize that quite soon. So again, that's why people probably don't rely on my scripting skills, but they can simply rely on this button that we click. Correct, Yves? Back to you.
On PowerPoint.
On
Yes,
PowerPoint.
Perfectly well. And the animation will come from Matthias. So with you are the guy for PowerPoint animations still. And this is how you can keep Matthias busy for hours and hours and hours. Just give him a PowerPoint animation task.
At least it always works.
Good. I think that's more or less covering the primary items for now. As said, it's like partner contracts. Be sure to review that if you have the need, or if you want to talk to any one of us, please feel free to reach out, and we try to make a slot available as soon as possible. VCF, we covered some of the basics today. We will do another session. The next VCD roundtable is going to be around 10.5.1, because there were quite a few changes in that minor release, which we think we should be talking about. We will record that very soon and hopefully get that out very, very soon, maybe next week or the week after. And then we are going to start a VCF series. We are going to lay out a bit on the topics in our next episode. And with that being said, I'm already saying goodbye and handing over to Matthias for his goodbye and his final words for today. And by the way, Happy New Year.
Yeah, looking forward to really more streamlined, standardized infrastructures underneath VCD, which should support or make troubleshooting a lot easier. We'll see how it works. Just plan ahead in your strategy, moving towards VCF. And with that saying, Happy New Year. Fabian.
That's how it works. So yeah, I mean, if you have any questions around VCF or VMware or anything related, we are there to help and guide you. And yeah, if you have a problem, who you gonna call? Toby?
Yeah, also from my side, Happy New Year. And thanks for joining. And yeah, looking forward for the whole VCF story. Sascha.
Yeah, I would say thanks for joining. Be prepared for what happens in the future. Prepare yourself, inform yourself, stay up to date. That's very important, because many things changes in the next weeks, and many news will come up. So subscribe our newsletter, keep in touch with us, and see you and a Happy New Year.